This old man refused to stand up. What happened next shocked the entire police force. "Stand up, sir," the policeman shouted. But the old man didn't budge. Not because he was being stubborn, but because of a deeper, unexpected reason. A few minutes later, a fleet of shiny military SUVs pulled up. And what happened next left every policeman present speechless. They had just confronted a hero to whom the entire nation owed a debt of gratitude. It was an ordinary morning. The kind a city never notices: gray skies, quiet streets, a breeze rustling the flags above the courthouse. Pigeons pecked lazily at crumbs on the cobblestone path. And on a stone bench, facing the war memorial, sat an old man. He was still, his back straight, hands folded gently over a wooden cane polished by time. Hair silver, jacket neat, shoes old but clean, and his eyes fixed on the statue ahead. 3 bronze soldiers frozen in mid-charge, rifles raised, eyes fierce. He didn't move, not even when a patrol car rolled to a stop near the square. A young police officer stepped out. Sharp uniform, firm walk, voice clipped. He approached with the air of someone used to being obeyed. "Sir," he called out, "this area is closed for maintenance today. I'm going to have to ask you to move." No response. The old man didn't even blink. The officer paused, then raised his voice. "Sir, I need you to stand up now." Still nothing. Only the quiet creak of a leather glove tightening around a wooden cane. The officer frowned and looked around. Empty square. No witnesses. Slowly, his eyes, clouded with age, yet steady, met the young officer's. But he said nothing. Just a single nod, barely perceptible. Then, he turned back to the statue. The silence felt heavier now, as if the air had thickened between them. Frustrated, the officer stepped back and pressed the radio. "Dispatch, I've got a non-compliant civilian in the West Plaza. Possible obstruction. Requesting support." Within minutes, 2 more officers arrived. One of them older, but not old enough to understand. They surrounded the bench. "You're trespassing, sir," one barked. "This area is off limits. You'll be arrested for resisting a lawful order," another added. The old man didn't flinch, didn't tremble, didn't even seem to breathe. He simply remained still, as if he belonged there more than the statue itself. The older officer tried again. "Look, we don't want trouble. Just stand up. That's all." Something invisible. And when one of the officers reached out, fingers grazing the old man's arm, he whispered, not loud, not angry, but enough to freeze everyone nearby. "I lost them here." 3 words, heavy as lead. He looked at the statue again. "My brothers." Then he closed his eyes. And for the first time, the officers paused, glanced at each other. No protocol for this. No checkbox on the form for grief. Still, duty was duty. One officer raised his voice again. "Sir, I'm going to count to 3. But before he could reach 1, a distant engine roar cut the air. Then another. Then another. 3 black SUVs, military grade, turned the corner in unison. No sirens. No emblems. Just tinted windows and authority you could feel in your bones. The lead vehicle stopped inches from the plaza curb. Doors opened. Boots hit the pavement. Not fast. Not aggressive. Controlled. Sharp. Trained. And the moment those boots appeared, the police froze. One of the men, tall and clean-cut, walked over. Didn't even look at the officers. Just stepped toward the old man and saluted. A crisp, silent salute. The old man finally moved. He looked up and nodded once slowly. A private moment passed between them. No one else understood it, but they all felt it. The man in uniform turned to the police and spoke quietly. "Stand down. He has full clearance. You'll receive confirmation shortly." Before they could respond, their radios crackled. "Dispatch again." But this time the tone had changed. "All units do not engage. Individual at the square is confirmed. Repeat, do not engage." The silence afterward was deafening. The officers looked back, but the old man had already stood. Not by force, not by fear, but because he was ready. He turned toward the statue once more, then walked, slowly, steadily, toward the awaiting SUV. As he climbed inside, one officer dared to ask, Who was that man? The soldier looked at him and said only one word. Legend. The door shut. The convoy rolled away, and the square was empty once more, except for the echo of a silence they would never forget. The crowd had grown. What started as a quiet morning on the plaza had turned into something else entirely. Phones were raised. People recorded, not fully understanding what they were witnessing. An old man, on a stone bench, surrounded by officers in uniform. The first officer stepped forward again. Sir, for the last time, stand up. This area is under restricted access due to recent threats. Still, the old man didn't move. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared ahead toward the war memorial across the square. His grip tightened on his wooden cane, but not from fear. A younger officer, clearly agitated, pulled his gloves tighter and muttered, "He's defying orders. That's obstruction." Another added, "This could be a setup. What's he hiding?" Their eyes, trained to detect threats, saw only the surface. An elderly man, quiet, still, uncooperative. But what they didn't see was what sat silently in the left pocket of his faded coat. A coin, small, worn down by time. A challenge coin, stamped with a symbol not found in any public registry, surrounded by the names of operations never spoken on the news. The kind of coin that could make generals stand at attention. But the officers didn't know that. All they saw was a disturbance. One of them leaned in, his voice sharp. "You're forcing our hand, old man. If you don't move, we'll have to restrain you." Still the old man sat, unblinking, like stone. He wasn't afraid. He had seen far worse. Gunfire in foreign deserts, explosions in distant jungles, the faces of comrades who never came home. This moment? This was nothing. But it wasn't about defiance. It wasn't pride. It was something else. A promise. A memory. A silence that spoke louder than any protest. The bystanders began whispering. Why isn't he moving? Is he okay? Why are they treating him like a criminal? But the officers didn't hear that. They were focused on protocol. They began moving in. One clicked his handcuffs. Another reached for his radio. But just as the first officer raised his hand, a sound, a subtle one, click, 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 not from him, from the cane. The old man tapped it 3 times on the stone beneath him. 3 precise knocks, measured, intentional. The officers froze, confused. What was that? One muttered. And then, silence again, until a voice, calm, from behind. That man is not to be touched. They turned. A man in a dark suit. Nobody. No name tag. Just presence. He held up a black leather wallet. Opened it. No one saw what was inside. But whatever it was, it shut everyone up. The officers straightened. A few stepped back. From behind the suited man, 2 black SUVs rolled quietly into the plaza. Their engines barely made a sound. Doors opened. Boots hit the pavement. Not police. Military. Not loud. Not showy. But purposeful. One soldier, decorated but silent, walked directly to the old man. No salute. No handshake. Just a look, one of reverence, recognition. He knelt, placed his hand over his heart, and whispered, "Mission complete." "Sir." The crowd gasped. The officers? Silent. The man they almost cuffed? He wasn't a protester. He wasn't a threat. He was a ghost from history. A soldier once entrusted with secrets so deep. His name was wiped from public record. But among those who knew, he was a legend. And now he had returned. Not for praise, not for attention, but for a reason no one yet understood. He had kept a promise. And soon, they would all know what it was. It began with a sound. A low hum, distant, deliberate. Not sirens, not shouting, just a steady roll of engines. As 3 black SUVs, unmarked and silent, turned onto the street. The officers turned, confused. The bystanders fell quiet. These weren't police vehicles. There were no license plates, no flashing lights, just tinted windows, matte black paint, and presence. The SUVs came to a stop, not rushed, not chaotic, just exactly on time. Then, the doors opened, and out stepped men and women in uniform. But not the kind the public sees on recruitment posters. These were different, special, Camouflage patterns unseen in public issue. Boots polished but worn by use. Expressions carved from years of discipline. They didn't speak. They moved with purpose, directly toward the bench, toward the old man who hadn't stood. An officer stepped forward, nervous. "Hey, stop right there. This is a police situation." That's when he appeared, a man in his late 40s. Sharp eyes beneath a camouflage cap. Uniform crisp, bearing insignia no one recognized. He raised his hand calmly and said, with absolute authority, "Stand down. That man is not to be touched." The plaza went silent. The police hesitated. "Who is this guy?" One officer, his voice unsure, asked. "Who is he?" The soldier turned his head slightly, and then said, slowly, firmly, "That man is Colonel David M. Shaw, retired. A Medal of Honor recipient. My commanding officer." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. A Medal of Honor? The highest military decoration in the nation? Suddenly, the silence of the old man made sense. Suddenly, they were the ones who should have stood. The officer who had threatened to handcuff him. He looked away. Another took off his cap. As if instinctively, the man in uniform stepped closer to the old colonel. He knelt, not in submission, but in respect. His voice softened. "Sir, I apologize. They didn't know." The old man looked down, not with anger, not even sadness, just the same stillness. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat pocket and revealed it. The coin, a gleam of silver, etched with stars, numbers, and the seal of a covert division. A token given only under direct presidential command. The police had no idea what they were looking at, but the soldiers knew. The moment it appeared, every uniformed newcomer stiffened, not in fear, but reverence, because only a few had ever seen one. Even fewer had earned it, and no one ever carried it, without cause. The soldier glanced toward the officers, then back to the colonel. "Sir, may I escort you?" But the colonel didn't move. Instead, he turned his eyes back to the memorial in the square. A slab of granite, with names long forgotten by the city, but not by him. He whispered, "Not yet." One word, 2 syllables, but it froze every heartbeat. This wasn't just a visit. This was a nostalgia. He had returned with purpose, and it was only beginning. When the soldiers stepped forward, he stood tall. Then he saluted, a sharp, respectful military gesture, held for exactly 3 seconds. Not out of obligation, but out of reverence. Colonel Shaw returned the salute slowly. His fingers trembled slightly, but his gaze was steady. The police, the crowd, even the wind, held still. The younger soldier spoke, voice calm and precise. "Today is the anniversary, sir." Shaw nodded, and at last, he spoke, voice low, whether by time. "Yes, 50 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 50? One of the officers leaned in, confused. What happened 50 years ago? The soldier turned and answered, not to the officer, but to everyone. Exactly at this hour, on this date, Colonel Shaw led a covert evacuation mission deep behind enemy lines. He and 12 others volunteered to guide hundreds of civilians through a war zone. They were never expected to come back. Gasps spread. The soldier continued. They moved only at night. No radios, no maps, just instincts, courage, and silence. On the 6th night, they were ambushed. Half the team fell. But Colonel Shaw, he carried 2 wounded men on his back. Through fire, through jungle. He looked at Shaw, now misty-eyed. He refused to leave anyone behind. A pause. Then he added, "Only 4 men survived. Hundreds of civilians reached safety. Because of him." Shaw didn't speak. He simply turned toward the granite memorial, the one etched with names. He raised a hand, gently touched one corner of the stone, and whispered something no one could hear. The soldier stepped closer. His voice softened. "He comes back here. Every year. Same time. Same place. To remember them. He doesn't speak. He doesn't ask for attention. His silence is the ceremony." The crowd stood in reverent silence. No phones. No cameras. Just eyes now lowered. One of the police officers, the same one who had demanded the colonel stand, took off his cap. He looked down at the sidewalk, ashamed. Then, the police chief stepped forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. "We made a mistake." Colonel Shaw turned to him. There was no anger in his face, only something older, something quieter. Forgiveness, without words. He nodded once. That was enough. The soldier beside him adjusted his stance. "Sir, the escort is ready, if you wish to depart." But Shaw looked back at the bench. And the names. He sat down slowly, carefully, not because he was tired, but because he was still holding vigil, still keeping watch. A young boy in the crowd, no older than 10, walked toward him. His father tried to stop him, but the boy kept going. He stood in front of the colonel, and with the innocence only a child could hold, he asked, "Are you a hero?" The colonel looked at him, smiled faintly, and said, "No, son. The heroes are the ones who didn't come home." The boy nodded, then stood beside him, said nothing, just stood. Others followed, one by one, in silence. People sat or stood near the old soldier. No ceremony, no music, just stillness. And finally, respect. The chief looked around, then into the sky, as if realizing, too late, that respect shouldn't have to arrive in uniform. That heroes don't always wear their stories on their sleeves. Sometimes they sit quietly and wait and hope the world will remember, even if it doesn't deserve to. It happens slowly, and then all at once. The tension that once filled the air, the suspicion, the shouting, all dissolved. As the old man rose to his feet, a hush fell upon the crowd. No one said a word. Not the police, not the neighbors, not even the restless wind. He didn't rise with anger, or bitterness, or pride. He stood with something deeper, something older, worn like a hidden metal beneath his coat. Honor. One of the officers, barely 30, stepped forward. His eyes red, his hands uncertain, his voice caught in his throat. He looked at the old man as if seeing him for the first time, not as a suspect, not as a disturbance, but as a symbol, a chapter from a book he never read, a story no one told him. And then, the young officer did something unexpected. He stood at attention and gave a salute, sharp, respectful, held for exactly 3 seconds, not out of duty, but out of remorse. One by one, the others followed, each officer standing straight, hands raised to brows, eyes lowered in quiet shame. A line of uniforms saluting a man they once ordered to the ground. And in the stillness of that moment, a single tear rolled down the young officer's cheek. It was not just for the old man. It was for every veteran forgotten, every story buried, every moment of respect delayed too long. The old man didn't speak. He didn't scold. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply nodded, a gentle, almost imperceptible motion, full of grace and pain and forgiveness. He understood more than they could imagine, not just about war, but about silence, about waiting decades for the world to remember you ever mattered. Then a soldier appeared, not a police officer, not a neighbor, but an active duty serviceman, young, still in uniform, decorated. He stepped forward with reverence, cradling something in his arms, a bouquet, wrapped in the folds of the American flag, red roses, white lilies, and one yellow daisy tucked gently in the center. He offered it to the old man without words, and for the first time in the entire scene, the old man's hand trembled. He took the flowers, held them close, and slowly, he turned toward the small marble memorial by the square, where the names of the towns fallen were etched, most forgotten, some never known. Step by step, he walked, not with struggle, not with weakness, but with purpose, and every eye followed him. The square was silent. The angry crowd had become witnesses. The officers had become students. And the old man, he was no longer just a stranger. He was a reminder of sacrifice, of forgotten promises, of what it means to serve and be unseen. He reached the monument, kneeled, and laid the bouquet gently at its base. His hand lingered on the cold stone. Perhaps he was tracing a name, or maybe a memory, or maybe he was simply saying, "I'm sorry it took this long." Then, something strange happened. A child, maybe 7, broke from the crowd. She approached quietly, holding a small American flag in her hand, and without a word, she placed it beside the flowers. The old man looked at her and smiled. Not the smile of joy, but of hope, of knowing the next generation was watching, and perhaps this time they would remember. Behind them, the town stood still. No shouting, no barking orders, no tension, just a sacred silence. And in that silence, there was healing. Late, yes, but not too late. Because sometimes the loudest apology comes in the form of a salute and a tear. Some heroes wear medals, others wear time, and some, they wear silence. They don't ask for recognition. They don't demand applause. They just keep walking until their footsteps fade into history. Backhand index pointing right. If this story moved you, honor his silence by subscribing to The Quiet Hero. Share it. Let others see, so they remember, before it's too late to say, thank you.